There is now another evidence refers to the ancient Chinese sacrificial system. This is the most continuous religious practice in China. It had lasted for a few thousand years. It only stopped once again, like the classics, when China became a republic. But no dynasty had ever failed to continue this sacrificial system, and it's officially called the border sacrifice, Jiao Ji. Why border? Because it has to be performed outside the city, and particularly on the eastern side. Similar to the Hebrew practice, the sacrifice has to be performed outside. That's why Jesus was crucified outside Jerusalem. And this is the most continuous religious practice, just like we were discussing early on. This sacrifice appeared as soon as there is Chinese history. There is not a point that says, oh, they started to do this. So early on, Patrick talked about Da Yu, the founder of the Xia dynasty. The record says that in ancient times, the Son of Heaven of the Xia dynasty personally and reverentially sacrificed to Shangdi at the border. That is why it's called the border sacrifice. So the Chinese history recorded that and explained why it is called the border sacrifice. And because the Chinese capital has been moved from place to place, so there are a few archaeological sites, such as this one, found near Xi'an, which was a major capital in ancient times. And the purpose of this sacrifice is well explained. First of all, this sacrifice, it's deemed that men serve Shangdi. In other words, this is where men worship God. Now, even more important than that, it is explained to an emperor. The most important thing is to follow the principles of heaven. In following heaven, nothing is more important than the border sacrifice. So this is the most important thing that an emperor has to do. And then it is further explained in the Book of Rites. This is the Li Ji I talked about. It says to honor the rites is to honor the meaning intended in it. If the meaning is lost, then the sacrifices are simply presented as a national celebration. So the requirements can be fulfilled, but its meaning is not easily understood. The emperor who understands the meaning and practices it, he will be able to rule the nation. So the thing here is this: the sacrifice is not an end in itself, and it clearly says that there is an embedded meaning, and this meaning is not easily understood, but that if the emperor understands it, then he will be able to rule the nation. Wow, think about that. This is the key. This is the key to ruling China, a large population. So what is that meaning? I asked this question to the director of the Temple of Heaven, a lady that I got to become friend with, and she actually said she doesn't know, but she knew this passage. I said, well, this passage says that there is a meaning to it. So what is that meaning? She doesn't know, but I believe that some ancient Chinese knew. There's a story, and this is a historical record. The first dynasty was Xia dynasty, and then the second dynasty was Shang dynasty. This is where we get the Chinese term for doing business, because it was the Shang people that introduced trading, Shangren. So this dynasty was founded by a guy called Shang Tang, and in Chinese history, he is considered the first revolutionary, not Mao Zedong, because he revolted and overturned the Shang dynasty, and he did that actually very reluctantly. He wrote about it, but he said he was led by God to take over the mandate because the Xia dynasty has become too corrupt. Very similar to the story of David taking over the mandate from King Saul. But During his reign, actually the famine started before his revolution, and then it continued. There was this 7-year famine, and the people were dying. All right, Shang Tang, the new emperor, reigned over a period initially of devastation. People were dying, and so the ministers suggested that they should do something drastic. They have done everything. They have offered all kinds of sacrifices, and it seemed like Shang-Ti is not listening. So some guy suggested to him that perhaps they should do a human sacrifice. Now, there were human sacrifice in Chinese history, but it was not systematic. It was never condoned. It was never seen as the right thing to do. Interestingly, Shang Tang accepted. He says, okay, yeah, we shall do this. The situation is so dire and we should do that. So they set up a place and a time. And to everyone's surprise, when they showed up to come and observe the ceremony, and Shang Tang told them he would take care of everything, he had actually prepared himself. He had cut his hair, trimmed his nails, bathe himself, wash up, and he was going to be sacrificed like Isaac, and he was going to sacrifice himself. And then he made a prayer, and this is recorded in Li Shi Chunqiu. All right, this chronicle is produced by the godfather of Qin Shi Huang. It said that at this place, at the mulberry bush, Shang Tang prayed this prayer. I have sinned. The people have no part in it. If, however, the people have sinned, the offenses must also rest upon me. Please do not let one person's lack of virtue cause Shang-Ti and the spirits to destroy the lives of the people. So you see the Chinese term here, spirit is Gui Shen. All right. Gui are the evil spirits and Shen are the good spirits, just like our angels. So they understood there is a spiritual world. But the most important point about this prayer is that Shang Tang understood vicarious sacrifice. Now, this is uniquely a Christian concept, that one person can die on behalf of all the people. Now, this is a very powerful understanding. And this is the embedded meaning in the sacrifice. Just like the Old Testament animal sacrifice, which is explained in the book of Hebrews, were not meant to remove the sins of the people. They could not. The bloods of the animals, like the writer of Hebrews, they cannot remove our sins. But it was a preview of the true sacrifice to come. So I believe that some ancient Chinese understood that there would come a time when there would be a perfect sacrifice that could take away our sin and redeem the world. And this sacrifice has it's very well documented. We have artifacts dating back from the earliest dynasties, from the Wudi, the Zhou, and the Qin Han, Tang Song. Every dynasty, this is carried on, and like this altar at Xi'an. So we know that no dynasty has ever failed. The one that most people are familiar with, the place, the Temple of Heaven, it's the one in Beijing, of course. It was first built in 1420. Now, first thing, it's called the Temple of Heaven, which is a mistranslation. The Chinese word is Tian Tan, not Tian Miao. A temple is Miao, but Tan is an altar. So the ancient Chinese never referred to this as a temple because there is no idol. In the Chinese explanation, Miao comes from Mao, image, Mian Mao, the Mao. So a Miao, and this is explained in Chinese classics, it's a place where you put idols. But there is no idol. This is how I got clued into all this. I actually, when I first moved to Beijing, hated to go to the Temple of Heaven. I had this concept, this is like those Chinese temples I was familiar with. And I would take people to the Summer Palace, a Forbidden City. And then when they say, go to the Temple of Heaven, I say, oh. But I went because, you know, I had to entertain them. And then it was there that I discovered there are no idols. That really led me to start this journey. But this place was, it still is, the largest altar dedicated to the one true God. That's the worship of the one true God. It was built in 1420 when the usurper Yongle, the Ming Emperor, he killed his nephew and became the new emperor. And because his power base was in the north, so he moved his capital from Nanjing back to Beijing. The Ming started their capital in Nanjing. So it took many years. He actually hardly used this place. He died shortly after Beijing was established. But this place is 3 times bigger than the Imperial Palace, and that it is recorded that he used the better workmen and the best material for the Temple of Heaven over the Forbidden City. All right. He had to build both of them at the same time, and he used the better workmen and materials for it. This is a layout plan. It's a fascinating place. If you go to Beijing, I would encourage you to read my book and go and enjoy it. All right, a few things that it's a very, what shall I say, a very complex sacrifice, but it's very well documented. And somebody asked just now about the Qing dynasty. This is one thing, that when one dynasty takes over, usually they will get rid of all but some of the officials. Sometimes they are sent away and sometimes they are killed. But there's one group of people who will always be spared. And these are the ones that know the sacrifice. So you are quite safe if you work in this area, because the new dynasty will want to do it right. And the way they want to do it right is by having the people who knows how to do it. So 6 days before this sacrifice, the emperor will make a proclamation. This proclamation is to the people, but also to the spirits. Notice that when he refers to himself, he uses a superlative I. Okay, Zhen. Zhen is the honorific title reserved only for the emperor. Only the emperor refers to himself as Zhen. Right? So you can see here in a proclamation, the emperor sees himself superior, of course, to his subjects, but also to the spirits. And this is the original Chinese. These are all recorded, right? And that's the Ming Dynasty. That's the Ming statutes. So winter solstice, it's the 21st, the night between 21st and 22nd December. It is the shortest day of the year. Now in Singapore, we don't have the seasons. We're not very familiar, except that you will, maybe in your younger days, your parents will make the tanwan, you know, the what do you call that? The ball soup, the dongzhi. It's the most auspicious day in the year in the Chinese calendar, because the shortest day of the year happens on that day. And then from then on, the days will get longer. So the Chinese consider that the beginning of the yang period of the year. So it is on this day, 6 days before the winter solstice, the emperor would make the proclamation. And on the day before, the emperor and his entourage, usually a few thousand in numbers, all his ministers. Now, women were not allowed. There was only one woman who ever was part of this sacrifice throughout Chinese history. Anybody has any guess? Since you cannot respond now, I respond now. I'll tell you, is Wu Zetian, okay, the first and only female emperor of China. She was the only one, only woman that had participated in this sacrifice. But the officials would participate in this, and they have to fast. I will talk about that afterwards. And they have to, at about 10 a.m., the day before winter solstice, they will arrive in the western gate of the Temple of Heaven. This gate is called the Zhao Hen Gate. And this entourage, this painting of Qianlong's entourage, he would be in this sedan here on the lower right side, a few thousand. And what you see here, this painting, it's surrounding the one of the rooms in the Forbidden City. This is 1/10 of the entire painting. I couldn't put them all here, but I have a copy of the whole scroll. Then he would get to this place called the Fasting Hall. He would change out of his emperor's clothing, and then he would bathe himself and prepare himself, and he's here to pray and fast. He would fast from three things. He would fast from meat, he would fast from women, and he would also fast from doing business. Now, all the people that were part of that service had to do the same. So it was said that the ministers in those few days would not go home to sleep because they were afraid that people would accuse them of having a relationship with their wives or with concubines or with any women. That would be very serious business. The emperor cannot allow anyone to mess up. This is a very serious fast. And then they will also wear on their like a, what do you call that, like a tag, all right, that says I'm fasting. So during that time, nobody is supposed to talk to them about business. You know, sometimes when we go to church, maybe we should practice that. I'm fasting. I'm in worship. Don't bother me. All right. This is the fasting hall. You notice there is a moat. Because now there's no water, they planted grass on it. That's because the emperor had to spend the night there, all right, for protection. They would have this surrounded by a moat. Now, Yongzheng was not a popular emperor, and people suggested that he usurped the throne. Yongzheng never slept here. He just would go back. But all the other emperors would spend the night here in preparation for the ceremony. And inside, just outside this prayer hall, you see a pavilion. And those few days when he was there, this statue would be placed there. And there's a story to that. This is not an idol. This is actually a reminder. It was said that at one time, an emperor was not doing the right thing. He was fooling around, in other words. He was really not fasting and praying. So a minister confronted him. And so from then on, they put this statue, and you see his hand like this. Actually, they would have a tablet. The tablet is a reminder that now is the time to meditate, to pray, and to fast. Then after he has changed into his priestly robe, the religious robe, he will come to this place called the Imperial Vault, Huang Chongyu. Now, if you have been to the Temple of Heaven, this place is most famous for the resounding wall, Huiyin Bi, right? If you stand at the right place, you can play Chinese telephone. You know, you can stand one, and the sound would just travel around. But usually, when there are lots of people there, you cannot test it out. To test all this, you must go there in the winter where there are very few people. Okay, he will show up here. This is a place where the tablet for Shangdi would be put. Early on, I told you about the two gentlemen. It was here. I was standing here. They were standing next to me. They were trying to strain their eyes to decipher what was on the tablet. All right, this is where the emperor will come and basically pray and give an account and tell God that he's ready. He's ready to worship him. Everything is prepared. So he will prostrate himself, all right, in front of this tablet. And you notice there are no idols, not here nor anywhere. So this is certainly not idolatry. This is where he keeps this holy tablet for the name of God. And what does it say? It says Huang Tian Shangdi. On the right, you see the Hanzi. And on the left, you have the Manchurian script, because the Qing dynasty was Manchurian. So I would assume that before the Qing dynasty, you wouldn't see the Manchurian script. But this term is the highest honor for the Creator God. Huang Tian, Huang means August, huge. Tian will be explained, and Shang means above, is the Lord above. So the emperor would prostrate himself and tell God he's ready. Now, you are probably more familiar with this bigger structure. Now, this is actually called a Qinian Dian. This is a place, he would come here in the springtime to worship and to pray for a good harvest. And these are all magnificent structure. They are built without nails, all right? There is no hammering or things like that to be heard. The design is superb, all right? There is no finer Chinese architecture than what you see here. And this is all built by the Ming Emperor Yongle after many years. You see the inside, it is so magnificent and ornate, all right? Like I said, it is much better than the Forbidden City. So it shows you his priority, who he considered to be more important. And then you will see the sacrificial animal, all right? These are the animals, and they are prescribed, all right? The book of Li Ji explained that this got to be special animal. So the Chinese word is te, shen. Now, some of you who understand Chinese will know te means special. But originally the word te means this kind of sacrificial animal. It is a special kind. They few months before the sacrifice, the emperor would send out usually his most trusted brother or minister to scour the land to look for pure color animals, and has to be without blemish. Even the size of the horn has to be up to specification. It's very precise, all right? And every dynasty would choose one color, and the Qing dynasty, as you can see here, chose white, all right? All the animals for the sacrifice have to be albino white. And so this goes, it's similar to the Old Testament and the New Testament. Of course, we understand the book of Hebrews explain that because this is a preview for the sacrifice to be performed by Jesus, that only a perfect animal, a perfect sacrifice is accepted by God. Music was a very important part of it. Now, I mentioned to you about Qin Shi Huang destroying the books, and this was majority of this. Confucius, who heard the music, said that for 3 days he did not need to eat. So this music must be wonderful. But unfortunately, we do not have the music. We have the words, but the music is lost to us, mostly because Confucius destroyed them. But during the time of Qianlong, of the Qing dynasty, it is recorded that he had 2,000 musicians living in this conservatory. Now, most people who go to the Temple of Heaven today do not know that there is this conservatory, which is to the, let me think, okay, to the west of the complex. So if you go, make sure you go to this place. And it's important to note also that these musicians were dedicated, set apart for this. It is said that these musicians were never used to entertain the emperor. Sometimes you see movies and they bring these musicians out. That's not right, because it is recorded that these musicians serve only Shangdi. So they never allow them or allow themselves to entertain other people. It has been restored, this by my friend, who was the director at that time. She's no longer there. She's now the director of the Beijing Museum. But magnificent musical instruments. And I was able to perform a Chinese Christian music festival there. And this is my friend Timothy Su, a Christian conductor, and we had a wonderful time. But you see here, that it is a tradition that at the end of every sacred music performance, they would use a brush to brush different colored cards. They are of different heights on top of this creature. This creature is supposed to represent the earth. And these cards represents different people, the inequality. The whole idea is that this worship of Shangdi will bring about peace and harmony. So the brush is to signify that all the injustices will be brushed away. But the most important event, of course, is the sacrifice itself. It will be performed on this circular mound. Chinese term is yuanqiu, like a cake. It has 3 tear and 9 steps to every tear. So you have to walk 9 steps to the next flight. The sacrifice will be performed at 9 quarters before sunrise. So it will be around 4:15 a.m. on December 22nd. Now, I live in Beijing, so I tell you that 4:15 a.m. in this, at that time, considered the suburb of Beijing, outside the city, will be very cold. All right, it can get as low as minus 35 degrees Celsius. But this is serious business. All right, the emperor would come here. At midnight, the place would be lit up, and about 4:15, the emperor would already be here, ready for a 9-part ceremony. Everything has to be 9, all right, to signify eternity, 长长久久, all right, 9, 9. I told you about the coldness. The Ming emperor actually do not wear shoes when they perform the sacrifice. It's recorded. All right, this is the plan of this place. There is a stone here called the Tongtian Shi. All right, this is a stone to heaven. This is where the emperor, position number 5, is where the emperor would stand throughout the ceremony. And position number 1 is the tablet, where we saw early on from the imperial vault would have been moved and placed here. And then these are various other items. There's only one other person with the emperor on the tear, and that is the master of ceremony. Everybody else has to be below. His sons will be here, this 18, 19, 20. And then all the few thousand people will be on the south of him. So even in this, you will see that the idea that the emperor now assumes the role of the mediator between God and man. God and then man behind. Now there are other tablets here. This was a stumbling block to the Roman Catholics. I will talk about the Jesuits the next time, but the Jesuits discovered this, and actually the Jesuits participated in this ceremony because the Jesuits were raised to the highest ranks in the Qing dynasty. These other tablets contain names of the ancestors. So when Vatican heard about it, they were furious and they say this is syncretism. And so they had a debate, but Emperor Kangxi, considered one of the best emperors in all of Chinese history, he reigned for about 50 years. He explained, no, he says, I do not worship my ancestors here. I bring them along to the worship. They are not the object of my worship. I only worship Shangdi. There you go here. So you have the emperor's own words. This is recorded, all right? And I believe it is still in the Vatican's archives, that the emperor explained that he doesn't worship his ancestors. He has their tablet for remembrance, but also he brought them along. He believed their spirits are around and that they should come and join in the worship. Now, the emperor doesn't stand here sorry, I said early on he's standing. No, actually he's in position 17. 9 times he would ascend to the top tier to position number 5 for every part. And then every time he goes up there, he will perform the highest form of homage, the Sanbai Jiukou. That means he will prostrate himself 3 times. Every time he will kowtow 3 times. So in other words, 9 times 3 times 3, he would have to kowtow, he would have to prostrate kowtow 81 times, in other words. So you can see that this is a very serious business, and it's the highest form of humility and honor performed by the most powerful person that ruled the largest empire in the world at that time. And so this is a stone I referred to, it's called Tongtian Shi. This is where the emperor would stand, and the tablet would be somewhere here towards the north here. Now, if you are there again without people, you will experience the amazing acoustic created by the architect. All right, I like to demonstrate to my guests. I usually bring them there at the end of the day, or especially at winter when there are fewer people, like a day like this. You'll be able to experience the echo, all right, the sound that is amplified. So the emperor, of course, without amplifiers, had to pray, had to read out his prayer aloud. And so that is amplified for everybody to hear. Marvelous architecture, all right? Every part has a prayer song. It is actually very interesting to study these prayers. They are very similar to the book of Psalms we have in the Bible. So the first one, when he welcomes Shangdi to his presence, he talks about creation, all right? Of in the beginning there was the great chaos without form and almost like the book of Genesis, all right? So I do not find any syncretism. I do not find anything that is theologically unsound about their understanding of God. Now, every piece of this is had music to it, but we don't have the music. We have the words. These were sung and performed. So it's like a worship service. Now, early on during the proclamation, remember I referred to early on, 6 days before, he will proclaim to the spiritual world and to his people, and he used the word 正, superlative I. But now when he's speaking to God, you see this song, the Yuan He song, he calls himself 臣, servant. So it's very clear. The emperor sees himself superior to the spirit, but subjected to Shangdi. The priority is very clear. And early on, I told you about the father-child relationship. You see that here in this song. This is the second part of it. His offering of gems and silk. He calls God his father, and he calls himself God's child. So this explains or expresses a personal relationship that the emperor can have with God. This is the finest form of silk called yubo, and this is what they will use for the sacrifice. For the wine, later we'll talk about, they will use pure water. They actually do not use alcoholic drink. So anyway, the third part would be the offering of the animal. This is the sacrifice. And once again, you see, he calls himself Chen. All right, and then the fourth part, the offering of wine. They believe that they have they will use sort of a spring water. They consider that to be holy water, the purest form, not wine. And here you see he humbles himself and he acknowledges that he is just a foolish servant. Then he will make his prayer. Now this is where, remember at the fasting hall, this is what he had to do. This is where he will write his prayer to Shangdi. This is a one from the Qing Dynasty, Jia Qing's prayer. So he refers to himself as a reed or a willow, lowly stuff. He calls himself an ant, and then he recognizes, he acknowledges that the mandate comes from God. This is the original Chinese. And then another song, it's called Jing He, And again, you notice that he continues to acknowledge that he's just a servant of God. Now, then the fifth part, this is where they were, the earlier one, he will perform the martial dance, and now they perform the silver dance. Usually when the emperor came on the throne through military power, they will perform the military dance first. But if it was a peaceful succession, they will perform the silver dance. And here in this song, you notice that he affirms the creation. So for thousands of years, the Chinese believe that the world is created, believe in creation. And this is the reason why the creation ministry around the world engaged me. And now I am in the process of getting my book translated into Portuguese for the Brazilians, creation ministry, because we know that the ancient Chinese for a few thousand years do not have any other notion except that God created the world. And then the sixth part, which is the third presentation of wine. Once again, he recognized himself as the servant. Then the seventh, it's the remover of all the sacrifices. Here, I find this song interesting. Now we understand, we all know that the Bible described God as the potter. Even the ancient Chinese also accepted that. You notice that the emperor saw God as the potter. Why? The potter shapes and reforms us. All right, the whole idea that Jeremiah went to the potter's shop and God used that to show him, his relationship with man. So God, in the same way, is a potter in our life. He breaks us up, just like this period of pandemic. It's part of God's purpose, and He's using it to reshape us, to give us new direction and reform us, transform us. Then the eighth part is sending off. Now, again, just like Solomon understood, the emperor understood that God is too great to live amongst in buildings made by man. So in the eighth part of the ceremony, he will send God back. And then the ninth part is actually the burnt offering. Now, this sequence is also similar to the Old Testament. All right, the burnt offering had to be performed at the end of it. And Paul talks about this and explain. So you will find that this is a place, all right? This is at the end of the ceremony. The ceremony started at 4:15. 9 quarters later, at about 6 o'clock on winter solstice, the sun would about to rise. And the emperor would stand here facing east, and the animal would be burnt, all right? So you will see the smoke going up. They would use sandalwood, all right, a very fragrant wood to perform the burnt offering. You notice on the left here, there is a pit. The pit is for the parts that cannot be burnt, all right? Very similar to the Hebrew practice. And this is the part I talked about when Paul talks about we as a fragrant sacrifice. Our service comes after salvation. So similar here, this burnt offering is a reference to our service. It's after the sacrifice, but be careful because not every part of us is suitable to be used to serve God, and it is explained here. So this is probably the scene the emperor would see, and you see the cauldrons with all the gems and other sacrifices.